This segment is about proper placement of matrix bands. Do you remember how I talked earlier that there is a proper sequence or a proper order of things? But remember, each thing we're using has its own purpose and is trying to take care of several different things at the same time. Well, the main reason for putting the matrix band on, of course, is so that we don't bond this tooth to this tooth when we're filling the hole. When I place the matrix, I want to make sure it's down all the way. Sometimes for people trying to place the matrix band, they'll notice that it doesn't go down all the way. You can feel a definite hard scratching when the bottom of the matrix band is hitting the floor of the box. You need to go past the floor of the box down into the gingival tissue. It'll feel soft and feel like it's in the right place. After you placed the matrix band in, then you're going to place the wedge. Now the wedge has several purposes. It's not just to be able to hold the matrix in place, although that's one of its main purposes. The wedge will, first of all, hold the matrix tightly against the tooth. The second thing that the wedge does is it stops bleeding by the pressure of the wedge. The third thing the wedge does is it moves the teeth apart so that when I fill this up, now when this wedge is removed later, the tooth can move and sit tightly against the one in front of it. That's how we make great contacts. We use several different things to make a great contact. The wedge is just one of them. Once I place the wedge, I check to see if it's accomplished all the purposes that it's supposed to do. First of all, is the bleeding stopped? Once I rinse out the box, is there no more bleeding in the bottom of the box? Second of all, once I've rinsed out the box and seen there's no bleeding, does it look like it's held the matrix band tightly up against the floor of the box? Or is there a space where I can see the red gingival tissue? We want to make sure our wedge is tightly placed, the matrix band against the tooth. And finally, I need to be sure that my wedge is not right in the middle of my contact. Sometimes, anxious assistants trying to accomplish the first two tasks shove a wedge in so far that the wedge is getting right in the middle of the contact. So then even if I do fill it full of composite, when I take the wedge out, there's going to be a big space between the filling on this tooth and the tooth in front. Be careful that your wedge is not getting in the way of the contact, or it will have to be replaced. Sometimes you'll find you have to get a larger wedge to correct that problem. Finally, the last tool we have in creating a great contact is placing a ring. And these rings are placed in a way to allow us to be able to separate the teeth. Usually you can put the ring right next to the wedge, and I will often hold this with my finger so the ring doesn't cause the matrix to bounce up. You notice when I put it on without holding it, the matrix band started to squeeze up. What I'll do is put my finger on here, put the ring on here. That holds everything in place. Now I'm going to have a nice tight contact. To be sure I have a contact, I'll take a ball burnisher, which I don't have here, and I'll burnish very tightly my contact, my matrix right up against the tooth in front. Very tight burnishing. Now we've used three methods of making sure we get a great contact. Number one, a wedge to pull the teeth apart. Number two, this ring to help pull them further apart. And number three, the ball burnisher to burnish whatever I can against that tooth right there, shaping the matrix so the composite will be able to go in there nicely and make a nice rounded contact with the tooth in front of it. Now when we take off our matrix band, we do things in order. First of all, we'll take the ring off. I will usually leave the wedge in place because if I take the wedge out too soon, guess what happens? Lots of bleeding. I still want to do some curing on this tooth. So what I'll do is I'll move the matrix band back out of the way, opening up the mesial buccal and the mesiolingual for a great perpendicular placement of my light. From the buccal first for a couple of times, and then from the lingual. Again, I'm moving the matrix band out of the way and curing very well. Now the reason I cure before I take the matrix band off is because if it's not cured down on the bottom and I take that matrix band off, I'm going to pull gooey, uncured composite right out of the bottom of the box, defeating the whole purpose of our filling. So I'm going to make sure I've cured well from both sides while the matrix is still in place and while the wedge is still in place, because if I take the wedge out, it will bleed. After my curing is complete, then I'll remove the wedge, and then I'll make sure that I have unbound the composite from this. I'll push a little on here, push a little on here, maybe on the occlusal area I've got to remove some here so that this wedge, so the matrix is not tightly stuck to all the composite. Then I can grab with my hemostat and I can twist it right out of the interproximal area. Do you remember how we talked that it's so important to do things in the right order but for the right reason? For example, an anxious new assistant will just simply follow the steps of placing the matrix, placing the wedge, and placing the ring, not trying to see the final picture that we're trying to have in mind. What we want to see happen is that we have a nice, great, rounded contact with the tooth in front. Let's say I just place the wedge and I don't get it quite below the box because it just doesn't seem to be fitting right, but I think, oh well, it looks like it's in there. I'm going to put the wedge in now. And then I place the wedge, and things move around, and they don't really look like in that good of a position, but I think, you know, oh well, I know you're supposed to put the wedge in next. Finally, I take my ring, and I decide I'm going to put the ring on there, because that's the next thing I'm supposed to do. At this point, now putting the ring on, I don't really have a very nice looking situation here. The matrix band is poorly placed, it's up too high, inside the box it's going to be leaking, and the wedge is placed right in the middle of the contact. You don't do things just because there's an order. You'd make sure each step takes care of its purpose.